Okay, why don't we get started? Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a great day. And thank you for joining our webinar, Raising Adventurous Eaters. I'm Letty Swank, and I work for the co-op. And I'd like to welcome Katie Kimball, who will be our speaker today. Katie is a blogger, former teacher, and mom of 4 kids who founded the Kids Cook Real Food eCourse and is a national voice of healthy kids cooking. Her blog, Kitchen Stewardships, helps families stay healthy without going crazy. And she's on a mission to connect families around healthy food and teach every child in America to cook. Her latest adventure is a pandemic-canceled TEDx talk turned DIY, redefining the kids' meal and starting a hashtag Kids Meal Revolution, followed up by a TEDx talk in Bismarck in 2021 about kids' critical thinking in the kitchen. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items. The webinar is scheduled for the next hour, so we have plenty of time for questions. Since everyone who has joined in is in listen-only mode, please feel free to chat your questions in the chat box. We'll answer as many as we can. And now I'll turn it over to Katie.
Thank you, Letty. And hi, everyone. It's always so good to be here. And I'm just going to start by saying that we are laying the foundation today to solve your picky eating problem. Not going to solve it in the next hour, but we're going to give some good foundations. And I want you to start by believing me when I say that hunger is not life-threatening. Okay, we're going to start from that place of agreement that we need to sometimes let our kids get hungry, and it does them a real disservice to feed them or allow them to wander into the pantry and serve themselves snacks every time they want to, because they may forget what it feels like to be hungry. And we know that hunger is actually building an appetite, which helps food taste better. So that's kind of our first step. So whether your kids eat great and you just need a little encouragement to keep it up, or maybe your kids are vying for picky eater king or queen, or you could just use some tips on getting more vegetables incorporated in your meals, you're definitely in the right place. Because I believe the most powerful way to show kids they matter, that they can make a difference in the world, is to teach them to cook, to give them that ability to nourish someone else, to fulfill the most basic human need that we have in a way just like an adult would. It gives them so much confidence. So I'm really glad you're here. We're going to jump into this 3-step process to end mealtime madness and get kids to eat healthy food. And again, I am a teacher in the Kids Cook Real Food eCourse. And as I taught my own kids to cook, what I learned is that cooking helps kids approach food with curiosity instead of fear, be so involved, and actually really enjoy the process and become more confident in themselves. So that's why we're going to talk today about both working at the table and working in the kitchen when it comes to picky eating. What you'll learn in the next 40 minutes includes how to win every time you play the game of dinner. And by the way, we want our kids to win too. I really believe that there don't need to be power struggles with a winner and a loser at the table. I'll teach you the snack time rule. That'll be your new best friend. Tell you why when you serve veggies can make a huge difference. And I've got 21 phrases for your parenting toolbox, because I don't know if you know, but we have a certain finite number of good decisions we can make throughout the day. And as parents, we're constantly working our brains, right? And there's a reason you start to feel fatigued by dinner time. You are literally running out of good decision-making power. So we'll make decisions today about how we'll react to certain situations. And I'll give you these phrases you can just pull out of your toolbox and serve them to your kids without having to think, without having to make the decision. These are definite power struggle diffusers to keep those family mealtimes peaceful. And of course, as a kids cooking teacher, I'm going to teach you how to leverage your unfair advantage in the kitchen and talk about how we build connection, confidence, and creativity for your kids. All right, so the 3-step process goes like this: prepare the space, lead with your ace, and keep a poker face. So step 1 is to prepare the space. And what that is about snack time. I firmly believe that a good dinner starts with a properly planned snack. So prepare the space. I'm going to encourage you to leave at least 90 minutes between any meal and any snack on either side. If you have older kids, this may be 2 to 3 hours. I'm going to encourage you to serve only one snack between each set of meals, right? So between lunch and dinner, there should be one snack. Really, if you're following the 90-minute rule, probably there's only time for one. And no seconds on snacks. That is a rule that I implement for kids, partly because if we allow them to get more, sometimes they don't know when to stop. And sometimes we don't know when to stop saying yes. And then what happens? They get too full on the snacks. To help you remember, I call this the MS-90 one and done rule. So MS-90 is that meals and snacks are 90 minutes apart, at least, one and done. One snack between meals, one serving of snack. And that's sort of one of my superpowers, is just making sure that everyone has fun ways to remember things. That's what we do in our kids cooking course for safety. And that's what I'm going to try to do for your tired parent brains today too. Now, once your kids have that appetite, what do we do with it, right? Well, we're going to lead with your ACE. And what that means is serving the vegetables first. For most of us, the vegetables are the category of food that we most want to see go into our children. And so when they have that appetite, we know those first bites of food taste the best. So that's what we're going to serve first, okay? And there's a very specific pattern I want you to follow. I want you to put those vegetables out with nothing else on the table, okay? And I want you to put those vegetables out with no expectation words. We're not going to say, I hope you try one. We're not going to say, here are some veggies, eat them up, or anything like that. And it's not about dinner starts after you finish your veggies, none of that. It is just an opportunity for your kids with no expectation to eat, to encounter those veggies, to engage with them if they choose, and hopefully to, again, approach them with curiosity and not fear, to engage with those veggies and make friends with them. I have two favorite ways that I like to do this. And the first one is the first one is veggies and dip, right? Raw veggies, super simple. You can prep those ahead of time. This is great, especially as you're transitioning to MS-90 one and done, because sometimes kids are maybe not used to that gap and they're starting to get a little hungry too early. Maybe they're too hungry a half an hour before the meal. And particularly if they start going into that hanger episode and they're starting to melt down, you want to make sure that you have something to put out there. So veggies and dip are super easy to have on hand, already washed, already cut, and just kind of put those out and say, if you're hungry, this is what I have. It's the beginning of dinner, right? It's not a snack. It's just the beginning of dinner. My youngest is 7. His name's Gabe. And he always says, Mom, like it'll be maybe half an hour before dinner. I say, Mom, I'm getting hungry. Can I have an appetite? Because he doesn't know, he can't figure out the word appetizer. Can I have an appetite? Like, you already have an appetite, but here's an appetizer. The second way that I like to do this is that picture on the right, and that's a blended soup. Okay. Now you can see that we made faces on that blended soup, and that's one of sort of the bits of magic pixie dust with this strategy. And I would not recommend serving a blended soup every night, right? This is something that you try from time to time. It's a little bit of an intervention strategy, but here's how you serve the blended soup. You serve it as a first course. Again, nothing else on the table. I usually tell my family, oh, the meat's not done yet. And they believe me, because that's really, really common that dinner's a little late because the meat's not done yet. So you say, the rest of the meal isn't ready yet. We're gonna do like a restaurant tonight. And here's your first course. Here's our soup course. Everyone comes to the table. Okay. It's a little different than kind of the veggies and dip you can put out before calling the family to dinner. The blended soup, just put it out and everyone comes to the table. You start your meal. This is your first course, but there's no other options. Again, kids don't have to eat it, but they do have to sit there and they do have to encounter their food. Now you can make it fun in a couple ways. One is by serving it with a straw. Oh my goodness. The straw is such a novelty, especially for like our younger kids, even like 8 years old and below. It makes it fun and interesting. And I am serious, like at least 50% more soup than you would expect will go into each child because you serve it with a straw. If you have small bowls, I recommend snipping that straw in half just to stop it from flipping out. And then we make faces. We put a little sour cream in a sandwich bag, snip off the tip, right? We're going to make little faces. You can put a pat of butter on there and sort of let that melt as the nose. You can shake some dill on there as eyebrows or a mustache or a beard. Let the kids have a little fun with it. But again, try that as the only thing on the table. Okay. And I think I have about 5 different blended soup recipes at kitchenstewardship.com/blended soup well, I think it's blended soups is the S. Blended soup is just that green one right there. But blended soups are also a wonderful, again, bit of magic pixie dust, because your kids who maybe are afraid of green foods or maybe have certain vegetables that they always pick out, they can't pick anything out of the blended soup. And okay, this one is obviously a green one. If you've got afraid of green kids foods, you might choose, a red or a white. There's great cauliflower blended soups out there. We have one on our site, and I have another one in a cookbook I have that's Mexican blended cauliflower. It's fantastic. Anyway, leading with your ACE is all about giving the kids what you want them to eat most when they are the hungriest. It sounds so simple, but it is so effective, even for our very, very picky eaters. Now, as we're talking about sitting down as a family, serving the same thing to everyone, it has to be said that if you have slid into a bad habit called short order cooking, this means I'm going to really, really strongly encourage you to break that habit. Okay. No judgment here, folks. We all fall into bad habits from time to time, and it happens, right? It just happens because it's easier and we're exhausted. If you are short order cooking, if you're making 2 meals for your family or 3 meals to fit everyone's needs, that is not serving your family. That is not creating family unity. And I highly, highly recommend that you work hard to shift into a new normal. Okay. I really believe that when we make special meals for kids, we lower our expectations for them, and they feel it, right? They're not going to rise to expectations that we have just lowered. Make sense? So ideally you may go cold turkey and go to the 1 meal club, or you may shift slowly into the 1 meal club. But I just encourage you to sort of create a new normal. What your kids experience in your household is what they think of as normal. And sometimes when we make the shift, there's some pushback, there's some fighting or arguments, but usually within 3 to 5 times of practicing your new normal, it tends to even out. So I have a picture of mac and cheese here because my good friend down the street had sort of this experience when her girls were about 2 and 4. She was absentmindedly reading the ingredients on the Kraft mac and cheese, and she was like, whoa, I don't know what most of that stuff is. She's like, this is kind of ridiculous that I'm making this mac and cheese, because she's a really good cook. She's like, I'm sure I can find an excellent homemade mac and cheese, and it will be like far better, and it won't have these weird ingredients that I don't recognize. So she made this beautiful homemade mac and cheese, served it to her girls, and her girls, what did they do, right? They're used to the kind of yellowy orangey Kraft stuff, and they wailed and they moaned and they fussed, and they said it doesn't look right, and it doesn't smell right, and it doesn't taste right, and it's just not right. And my friend, who's lovely, stubborn, sarcastic, that's why we get along really well, she said, this is what's for dinner. If you are hungry, I will see you in the morning for breakfast, right? And they may or may not have eaten it. And about a month later, she wanted to make mac and cheese again, made a lovely homemade recipe, served it out, and the girls still, oh, Mom, it doesn't look right. The noodles aren't the right shape. It doesn't smell right. And she said, this is for dinner. You may choose some side dishes if you don't want to eat the main dish, and I will see you in the morning for breakfast. Now, it took maybe, again, 3 to 5 times making that exact dish over the course of months until the girls veritably forgot about the blue box and they happily ate the mac and cheese. There was no wailing and moaning and gnashing of teeth at that point. And so it just takes some consistency, right? So if you're moving toward the 1 meal club, it won't take months. It should really just take 3 to 5 meals, but you gotta be consistent and don't give in, okay? Deal? Pinky swear me that one. Pinky swear me that one, guys, in the chat. What I want you to understand as we talk about preparing the space and leading with your ACE is something that it's a psychologist, Ellen Satter, has developed called the division of responsibility. And this is very well accepted in kind of the picky eating world. And every time I teach this, it's like a weight lifted off parents' shoulders, okay? Because sometimes we are caring about the wrong thing at the table. We are worrying about the wrong thing. So the division of responsibility is that parents, the adults, decide what is served, when a meal is eaten, and where the meal is eaten. And that's where it stops. That's where it stops. The children decide whether they eat and how much. Okay. And you can imagine that pretty much every power struggle at the table happens when we leave our lane or we allow our children to leave their lane. Okay. Here's the reason why this is true. Like, this is like just a truth, because parents, we can't make our kids chew. We can't make them swallow, at least not if we respect their bodily autonomy. Okay. We cannot make them chew and swallow. They know that. So if we try to make them eat, somebody's going to lose. Maybe everybody, right? If we try to make them eat, that is a power struggle that we cannot win. And they know it. That's leaving our lane, because it's their job to decide whether they eat and how much. Okay. Now, sometimes we let our kids leave their lane. It's our job to decide what is served. So when we say, what do you want? Or when we make that special meal, that short order cooking, we are allowing our children to make a decision that is too big for them. Okay. Great parents, and you know this, homeschoolers by and large are great parents. You're here, you're a great parent, you're being intentional. And you know that great parents set boundaries and then allow their kids to make some choices within those boundaries, right? That's how kids learn and grow and become independent. As they get older, we widen those boundaries. We let them make a few more choices. We let them fail a little bit. We help them out. We're there to support them, right? But if we let our kids choose what they eat, that's no boundaries. That's way too big of a decision for a child, because they don't have the life experience and they don't have, the self-discipline to make the right choices. That makes sense? So you decide what's on the table. They decide whether they eat, and they decide how much. Now, this freaks some parents out. Most parents, they're like, oh, I don't have to make them eat. I don't have to do the 3 more bites before you leave the table thing. I don't have to do the clean your plate before you leave the table thing. Really? And they're a little bit nervous, and then they try it and they go, oh, I like this. This feels less stressful. This feels better. Okay. For most parents. Now, some parents who are very, 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 very worried, who have kids who really, really aren't eating much, who have a very small number of foods they eat, they freak out a little bit. They say, Katie, my kid can't decide whether they eat because they won't eat. They'll make that bad choice. And I say, you just got to try it though. You just got to try it. There are some severe picky eaters who need feeding therapy, right? These strategies today will help, but they will not solve the problem, because you might need feeding therapy. For most of us, we have your average picky eater who's just struggling to have a great relationship with food. Amen. So you need to try it. Okay. You need to try it. Ellen Satter is wonderful at this philosophy, right? That the parents decide what, when, and where. The kids decide whether and how much. Now, what does that look like? Well, that's where Katie comes in. Katie's the practical. So that's why we're going to move into these quick, memorable phrases. This is just like I do with my kids in the Kids Cook Real Food eCourse. When we teach them to cook, we give them quick, memorable phrases to remember safety techniques. I'm going to give you all some quick, memorable phrases so that you can keep your poker face, be chill at the table. Don't worry about how much they eat. Don't worry about whether they eat. Okay. We're going to let them have their responsibility, and it goes beautifully. So keeping a poker face means we can't let our kids know that we are deeply invested in what they eat. Okay. Because then we open the door for that power struggle that no one can win. That's no bueno. We're going to keep our poker face. So here are some terms, some easy to remember terms that you can use. You might not like all 21. That's fine. I'm not offended. The ones that resonate with you, the ones that feel authentic to your parenting style, put those in your toolbox, print out the worksheet, take screenshots, write these down, and use them starting tonight. So first though, I want you to get out your big fat eraser and erase some phrases that you may have used in the past. Okay. When you talk about food and your kids, I want you to never use the following phrases. My kids are picky eaters. Okay. I do not want your kids to hear you say that, because if you do that, you put a picky eating label on their chest, and there aren't very many kids who rip off that label and say, oh, I'm going to raise the expectations and raise the bar for myself. No, we need to raise the bar. We need to let our kids out of the picky eating box by never using that phrase. Okay. Don't label your kids. When we're teaching our kids potty training, that's another thing that we can't make them do, right? That's why potty training sometimes has those power struggles. When we're potty training, we don't label our kids diaper duties or, poopies or whatever. Like, no, we just say they're potty training. That's a growth mindset. They're potty training. They will get out of diapers. They will learn to, go on the toilet. We've never actually worried that we'll send a kid to college in diapers, right? But why do we do that with food? Sometimes we genuinely worry my kid will never eat a vegetable in their life. No. We're going to erase that worry. We're going to erase that word, that phrase, picky eaters, because I don't want you to put your kids in that picky eater box. Deal? All right. So that one's erased. That one's gone. The next one that we need to erase is, oh, they won't try that. Right? I hear parents actually say this, and you may have said it too, because you're used to the habit of your kids approaching food with fear instead of curiosity. We're going to switch that today. I was in Costco once. My little guy Gabe was like 3. He was tiny, and we've always fed the kids everything that we eat. Right? We have team one meal. We eat the same thing, and so he had a pretty wide palate at age 3. And in Costco, it was some sort of fish dip or something on a cracker, and he said, "Can I try that?" I said, "Sure." And the elderly lady serving it was like, "Oh, I'm so glad you let him try that. Honey, you would not believe how many parents come through here and say, oh, no, don't give that to him. He'll never like it." And I'm like, oh, I hate when people say that. So we're like kindred spirits, the lady at Costco and me. I said, yeah, she said, if parents would just let their kids try it, maybe they'd like it. I'm like, yes, exactly. So we're going to erase the phrase, they won't try that. You won't like that. He won't like it. She won't like it. All that stuff. Always approach food with your children with that growth mindset. We've got to demonstrate that for them, that we believe that even if they don't like it today, even if they don't try it today, that someday they will. Cool. So we're going to get rid of some of those phrases. And then here's what you can say instead, because I know we can't just be silent. Parents talk all the time. Instead of they won't like that, or instead of he or she is a picky eater, just say my kids are still learning what they like, right? We're just learning to eat. That's true. It's absolutely true. You can tell your kids, oh, that didn't go well for you. Your taste buds aren't grown up yet. Maybe you'll like it. Maybe you'll like that when you're older. Oh, kids love these phrases. Parents love these phrases. They are so effective to keep the lines of communication open, to build that growth mindset, that growing, that learning mindset in your kids, just like you do with academics, right? Just like you do with reading. If your kid's struggling with reading, you don't say, well, he's a terrible reader. You would never let your kid hear you say that, right? You're just saying, oh, he's struggling a little bit. He's still learning to read. I know he's 8. He's still learning to read. It's okay. We always trust that our kids will learn what they need to know. Trust that your kids will learn what they need to know when it comes to learning to eat as well, because learning to eat is actually one of the hardest things humans ever have to learn to do. It's a 32-step process. We do things with our tongues when we eat, you guys, that we never do at any other time. Touch it. Do it right now. Okay. This is fun. I'm going off the rails here. This is not in the plan, but I think it's fascinating. Take your tongue right now and touch your back molars, right at your back. That is what you have to do. That is what humans have to do to chew. You have to move food from the tip of your tongue, with the tip of your tongue, from the front to the back molar. There are no words in any language in the world where you have to do that with your tongue. So if, let's say a kid has a weak tongue, let's say they're not very good at that motion, at tongue tip lateralization, it's called officially, they're probably going to look like a picky eater because chewing's really hard, because they can't figure it out, because they might be mashing food against the roof of their mouth instead of being able to move it to their molars. What in the world, right? Is that not so fascinating? There are lots of kids who are looking like picky eaters to their parents who actually just have trouble in their mouth, or they have trouble with their senses, or they have some belly aches that their family hasn't figured out yet, maybe an undiagnosed food sensitivity. It looks like they're picky, but they're just doing what they can do with the cards that they've been dealt. Okay. So we've got to remember that. We've got to remember that eating is really hard. One of the hardest things we'll do. And that hunger, short-term hunger, is not life-threatening. Those are really good reminders to you as we sometimes get worried about our kids and how much they eat. Okay. The second category that I want to encourage you in is to be a good example. Okay. This is sort of the reverse of oh, he'll never try that. Oh, she won't like that. No, be the example. Tell your kids stories at the table. Right now, everyone, I want you to think of a food you did not like when you were a kid, but now you're cool with it. And if you want to share that in the chat, that's always fun. There are certain foods that often come up. So tell your kids that story, right? As you're eating salmon, you can say, I never liked fish when I was a kid. My mom always tried to serve it and I never liked it. And now I love it, especially with mustard or whatever your story is. Tell that story, because that gives kids real life examples of that growth mindset and the fact that they're still learning to eat. And I want you to approach food with curiosity too. Oh, hey, I've never had that before, but I'll try it. Or like, I bought something in the produce section that I've never seen before. I have no idea even how to cook it. You guys want to look this up with me, on the internet and find a recipe? Demonstrating that example of an openness to trying new foods, very powerful for kids. Because parents, whether we like it or not, we are constantly modeling for our kids. They are constantly watching us. And so if we want them to try new foods, well, maybe what should we do, right? Try new foods. Okay, now, very scary situation for some kids is when a new food is served, right? Sometimes kids are like, not going to happen. That makes it scary for parents as well. So here are your toolbox terms for when you're serving something that your kids either have never tried before or they've tried in the past and not liked. Actually, you're going to serve it in the same way. Okay, if they're nervous about it and they think they don't like it, here is a term for your kids' toolbox, right? Think about this. If we're having trouble at the end of the day because we're indecision fatigue, how much less equipped are our kids than us, right? So you can teach your kids to say, it's not my favorite, right? That is what in the Kimball house, we say, we're not going to say, ew, we're not going to say gross, we're not going to say, oh, that looks disgusting, right? Those are all really inflammatory phrases that are hot buttons for the cook who worked hard on the meal. So instead, we teach our kids only to say, it's not my favorite. And if they say ew or gross or disgusting, I just gently redirect them. Oh, you mean it's not your favorite? I've done that to guests in our home too. Little kids who are guests, they'll say, oh, I don't like that. I'll say, oh, it's not your favorite. And they look at me like, I've never heard that before. But my kids get it, right? Once you train them, the bigger ones, then remind the littler ones. And bonus, it looks much more polite when you're out and about and your kids are presented with a new food at someone else's house. Oh, that's not my favorite. Now, here's the kicker. Can you say it's not my favorite? Can the kids say it's not their favorite before they have a taste? I say no. If before they have a taste, they can say things like, oh, I've never had that before. Oh, I'm not sure about that. Or I haven't learned to like that yet, right? All those kind of phrases. Our kids, they can say it's not my favorite only after they take a taster bite. Now, this is a big deal. I know a lot of families do things like a no thank you bite or a first taste bite. They're called many different things. What happens in many families, and it used to in mine before I knew better, is that it was a required bite. You have to take one bite of everything. Dr. Kay Toomey, who's the founder of the SOS approach to feeding, which I think is the premier strategy. She's the premier picky eating expert in the country. She taught me that no thank you bite actually closes cognitive doors because we're labeling it no thank you. So they're only going to take one bite. Okay, that's one problem with a no thank you bite. Then a problem with any bite that is required is that it's leaving our lane. It's leaving our lane in the division of responsibility, because if we require even one bite, that's telling our kids whether to eat, right? And that requirement of that one bite, I mean, I get it. It's just one bite, but we've all heard those stories. And I think a lot of us experienced this in our childhoods of like the 3-hour meal sitting and staring at the one green bean while the parent says, it's just one bite, just put it in your mouth. Let's be done with the meal, right? That's a power struggle where there's no winners. Well, there's a winner sometimes, right? When the bite goes in, the parent has won, but do you feel good about that when your child has just lost? No, we want everyone to be able to win the game of dinner, which is why we're not going to require a taster bite. We're not going to require a no thank you bite or a first taste bite. But what I do recommend you require is a taster bite on the plate. Cool. So whatever you serve, you can say, what the phrase I like to use is, if I'm serving them or if they're serving themselves, I say, would you like a taster or a serving? And if they say a taster, okay, so that one bite of that unfamiliar food is going on their plate. And you say, you don't have to eat it, but you just need to get familiar with it. Okay. What's interesting about it's not my favorite and taster bites is that it powerfully gives kids some agency. Okay. And the first time you do this, second time you do this, they might not really believe it yet, especially if you have had some required bites or even required cleaning of plates. They might not believe you yet. But once the kids get it, that they're no longer required to eat, their pressure lifts, right? They feel the weight off their shoulders. And when they realize that, they're given a great sense of agency. And if we're going to raise independent adults, our kids need to have some choice, some control over their lives, and some agency. It's an interesting twist what happens when you give kids permission to say it's not my favorite and permission to not eat the taste or bite, but have it on the plate. And my favorite story is from Erin. And she wrote me and said, I can't tell you how much of a difference that phrase, it's not my favorite, has made at our table. She's got a 2-year-old. And she said, honestly, my 2-year-old says it's not my favorite about something every single night. In the end, almost always eats every bite of the it's not my favorite food. Right? That's how agency works. That 2-year-old just wants a sense of control over his or her life. Right? And that 2-year-old says, that's not my favorite. And the parents say, okay, no power struggle. And then guess what? The 2-year-old's still sitting staring at that not my favorite food and is like, I guess I'll try it. Doesn't always happen that way, but it does often happen that way. So really powerful phrases for your kids too. Now, there are some kids who won't even let a taster bite on their plate, who don't want to approach it, who don't want to let it pass their lips, even if you're like sort of encouraging, but never requiring. So what we say to those kids is, it's okay to experience your food. Okay. Just let them pick it up and move it to another plate. They can pick it up, they can put it in the garbage, but they've experienced your food and that's okay. So we always want to have one bite on their plate. We never want to require that bite to pass their lips though. One strategy I use for those more extreme picky eaters who really don't want to take a bite is you can say a little salt makes everything better. You have a choice. You can smell it, lick it, or taste it. Okay. Now, again, this is for kids where you're like, I think they'll maybe like this. They're not like super afraid of food. They're really afraid. They need permission to move that food to another plate or to the trash. But you can say to like our average picky eaters, maybe like level 2 picky eaters, well, why don't you smell it, lick it, or taste it? And just see what happens. And that's SLT, makes everything a little better. If you're concerned that your kids are in the more extreme picky eater, especially if they seem to have some sensory issues, some smell, taste, texture stuff, I highly recommend a story that my writer Mary wrote. All of her kids have sensory processing disorder, and she's really moved them from having very few foods they've eaten to a very wide palette, wide variety of foods, but with no compromises on nutrition. She's amazing. Read her story at kitchenstewardship.com/SPD, and you can screenshot that or write it down, kitchenstewardship.com/SPD. And I love this story. She said 4 years ago, she learned all these strategies from me, and she was pretty convinced that her 3-year-old was beyond hope. He had sensory processing disorder. There are still foods that genuinely make him gag, but they instituted smell it, lick it, taste it. They gave it a try. It took 3 years before licking turned into nibbling. And now at 7, he still prefers meat to all else, but he takes his bites without too much resistance. I credit the licking rule. And she does have required bites. So she's got to come back. Because remember, I did used to teach requiring a bite. I don't anymore because I know better, right? When we know better, we do better. So now I need this mom to like come back to my new training and understand that you don't do the required bite, but to offer the choice of like, well, why don't you smell it, lick it, or taste it? If they don't want to taste it, you're like, okay, you can remove that and throw it away. Again, power struggle. Anytime we enter into a power struggle, somebody loses. And I don't want my kid to lose. I don't want your kid to lose. I don't want you to lose. It's not a good situation. Now, a quick reminder, if any of you have little children, age 2 to 5, it feels like they're all picky eaters. And here's why it's totally developmentally appropriate. They're learning about the world. It's a 2-year-old's job to begin to test boundaries and to see where their control ends and where your control begins, or rather, usually where your control ends and their control begins. So it's literally their job, okay? But it's your job to keep that division of responsibility. You choose what they eat. Do not let a 2-year-old take control and dictate that they're going to eat pretzels at every dinner. No, that is way beyond a 2-year-old's sphere of influence. So almost all kids in ages 2 to 5 feel like they're picky eaters. I highly recommend staying consistent, and many of them will change by the time they're 5 with a consistent environment. Statistically, about half of kids are picky eaters at some point in time, according to their parents, and at least a quarter of those completely outgrow it naturally with no intervention. So you're already learning some interventions. Your kids are probably going to outgrow it if they're a standard average picky eater. Do not worry. All right, now there's another situation that drives parents crazy, and that's when kids are hungry at the inappropriate times. Either it's between a snack and a meal, and you know that they shouldn't be hungry, right? Because they just ate and they say they're hungry. Or it's that kid who chooses to eat 2 bites at dinner and then circles back 20 minutes later and says, I'm hungry. Well, of course they are, but they just skipped dinner, right? So what do we do? What do we do? First, I want kids to think about whether they are really hungry. So I use the phrase, well, what kind of hungry are you? Are you hungry in your tummy? Are you bored hungry? Are you sad hungry? Are you just hungry because you walked to the kitchen and you saw that box of crackers, right? Because in our culture, we break our natural hunger. We break our natural appetite cues a lot, right? In your body, okay? Let me come back to my face. In your body, you know, we have these beautiful hormones. We have a hormone that goes up to make us feel hungry. We have another hormone that comes up as we eat that makes us feel that, you know, kills the appetite basically. So the communication between these 2 hormones and our brain is really, really important. But when we eat beyond fullness, which happens to us adults sometimes because we have a gargantuan restaurant meal and we've just sort of always thought that we have to clean our plate. It happens to kids when they're forced to clean their plate, or when there's just so much available, or maybe there's desserts that we just want to eat, right? Anytime we eat beyond fullness, we're going to start to break those hunger and satiety hormones. And when we eat when we're not hungry, right? How often do we eat when we're bored, y'all? How often do we eat when we're stressed? How often do we feed our kids? Maybe not us, but how often do other people feed our kids just because we went to a church event and they got food? We went to the library and they got a sucker. We sent them to homeschool co-op and they had 3 snacks. Like constantly, food is offered when it's maybe an inappropriate time and we're not hungry. So unfortunately, we can break our body's natural rhythm. The younger your child is, the more likely it is that they still have those natural rhythms of hunger and satiety. So the more important it is for you to teach them, you know, I don't know if your tummy is really hungry. Are you hungry because you're just bored? Let's go play a puzzle and see what happens, right? And try to teach your kids, what kind of hungry are you? We come back to this MS-90 one and done rule where I just say straight up, no seconds on snacks. That's how I say it very easily. And most of the time now, my kids are older. They're 7, 10, 13, and 16. They just kind of get it. Okay. When they were littler, I might have to remind them. They might ask for seconds on snacks. I go, oh, we don't do seconds on snacks. That's okay. So that they're not filling up on snacks. So that snacks are simply satisfying, cutting the hunger, but not filling them up, because we really want them to be hungry. We want them to have an appetite at the meal. Sometimes kids get worried. They're worried that they won't get food soon enough. And that's why they're saying they're hungry for more, or they want more snacks. So let the kids know your next eating opportunity will be dinner in an hour and a half. Would you like me to set a timer? Right? That's about as long as, you know, a trip to grandma's or whatever. Your next eating opportunity will be in 20 minutes. Don't worry about it, bud. Right? Just calm their stress with that phrase. Okay, now the end of dinner, right? I just mentioned sometimes there's those kids who eat the 2 bites and then they try to leave the table. Here's how we make sure we know it's time for our kids to leave the table. First, and I think you've kind of understood this by now, I am not a fan of the clean plate club. I would never advocate for you to say you have to eat everything on your plate before you leave, for a couple of reasons. One, you're leaving your lane. You're entering a power struggle. You cannot win because you cannot make them chew. You cannot make them swallow. 2, the clean plate club can break that satiety hormones communications with your kids' brains. And we want them to know when they're satisfied. We want them to know before they're full, really. We don't need to be full at every meal. We just need to be satisfied. So here's the deal though. I think we want our kids to have a really balanced diet, right? So I don't want my kids to eat just one thing. So imagine a plate or a meal, maybe this time of year, maybe we're having chili. So maybe we're having a bowl of chili and a piece of cornbread and a salad. Okay. That might be a pretty standard meal. kids tend to be drawn to those carbs. So I know a lot of your kids are probably like mine. They would eat the cornbread. They'd say, oh, Mom, that was so good. Can I have more cornbread? But if you give them the second piece of cornbread, they very well may eat that and then be satisfied and then be done, right? So while I'm never going to say you have to clear your plate, I do have a rule called finish your first before having seconds. And it's for that exact situation. When the child eats their one favorite food and then they ask for more of that favorite food, you know they're going to fill up. You say, oh, I'm so glad you love the cornbread, but we have a rule, finish first before having seconds. Oh, do I have to eat my chili? No, absolutely not. You don't have to eat your chili, but I'm not going to give you more cornbread right now because we do need to finish our first before having seconds. Now, a lot of people ask me, well, what about that taster bite, Katie? What if they have that taster bite on their plate and they are not into that? Do I still make them? Now, do I require the taster bite? No. So the taster bite does not count in the rule of finish your first before having seconds. And in fact, if they want to clear that taster bite to the trash, hopefully you can say, oh, on your way to the trash, you want to smell it, lick it, or taste it, right? They're a little more likely to do that when they know they can get rid of it. So finish your first before having seconds. And then when the child says, right, 3 bites in, they go, I'm full. Oh, okay. Well, it's good to know when you're full. Okay, that's your phrase. It's good to know when you're full. Or there are variations on that, like, I'm glad you're listening to your body. Oh, your body says you're full. It's good to listen to your body. We want to encourage our kids to pay attention to what their body's telling them. If their body's actually telling them they're full, well, then they may be excused. Now, personally, I don't let my kids be excused until they've sat at the table with the family. Okay. I don't want them to be incentivized by like, I get to go play as soon as I say I'm full 3 minutes into the meal. That's not cool. Right. We want family unity. So be like, oh, okay. It's okay that you're full. You can be excused in a few minutes, but right now we're having family time. Okay. Man, I'm giving you guys like a lot of extra bonus phrases here because I'm always growing and, increasing in my own phrases. So I do say it's good to know when you're full. Now, maybe the child will pick at a little more food as they're required to sit, never required to eat. Maybe they won't, no big deal. Keep your poker face. It's not your job to make them eat. When they're excused, here's what some kids will do though. 20 minutes later, they're coming back and saying, I'm hungry. Or they see like that dessert is served and they're like, oh, dessert, I'm not full anymore, even though that was 3 minutes ago that I said I was full. So that's where I pull out my favorite phrase, which is, oh, full means full though. I heard you say that you were full, and full means that any more food in your belly, even dessert, is going to hurt your belly. And mommy loves you and I don't want you to hurt your belly. Do you love the sarcasm? You have to be a little humorous sometimes as parents, right? You got to be a little sarcastic with your kids just so that you can survive and keep your sanity, at least for me. You don't have to do it sarcastically. You can just deliver those exact same lines real, right? If full means any more food's going to hurt their belly, we don't want their belly to hurt. So regardless of whether they're asking for a snack or dessert, well, that's a no. And then when they complain, you go, oh, well, being hungry will make breakfast taste so good. Would you like to start bedtime routine? Right? Eventually they will learn probably not to say they're full because we want honesty. If they're really not full, I'm full should not be a free pass to leave the table. I'm full should not be a free pass to be done with the meal. They should be honest. They should say, well, Mom, this chili's just not my favorite. Oh, okay. That's good to know. Thank you for sharing. And did you smell it? Did you, give it a chance? Right? Does that make sense? So we're just going to have open dialogue about our food. Oh, whoops. Sorry. That slide was already somewhere else. Now here are I have a couple advanced terms when we're talking more about dessert, when we're talking more about that mindfulness, that kind of listening to your body thing that we got going on. But I don't want to get out of here without talking about the unfair advantage, right? Because if you want to serve your kids vegetables, if you want them to eat those vegetables and eat those healthier foods, you should definitely implement this three-step process. You should definitely change your language, set routines with timing, alter your expectations so you're in your lane, and practice your poker face and your patience, right? And these strategies will make a difference. But if you want to supercharge the process and let all these strategies make a difference faster, well then, I highly encourage you to get your kids involved in the kitchen, away from the table where there's absolutely no pressure to eat. There's some really cool research about kids working with food and not even eating it. Okay. So first of all, when kids are involved with food, they're so much more likely to try new things. And here's how, what I call the exposure bucket works. Okay. Do you remember when your kids were toddlers, well-meaning grandmas usually, and other parents will say, oh, well, just keep trying. Don't give up on those peas, because kids need to try a food, right, 10 times before they like it. It's very well-intended advice, and sometimes it holds true, but we know that every child is different. So that number 10, sometimes a child will love those creamed peas after one try. Sometimes, especially our sensory kids, especially some of our potential picky eaters that we won't label picky eaters anymore, sometimes it might take them 67 times or 159 times before they're able to enjoy that food. That's a lot of tastes. But what brain science tells us is that any exposure, any encounter with a food counts to sort of fill that exposure bucket. So let's say you have a child who just doesn't love green beans yet. Well, you don't know how big their exposure bucket is, but if it's up there in the hundreds, 159 times, that's way too many green beans to put on their plate as a taster bite. But every time they go with you to buy the green beans, they wash the green beans, they cut the green beans, they help saute the green beans, they bring the green beans to the table and serve them to the family. Now you've got 5 exposures in one dinner. You will much more quickly fill that exposure bucket. Okay. And plus, when they're working with you in the kitchen, there's no pressure to eat. So that fear is lifted, and they don't feel the pressure. They feel like they have agency. They feel like they have control, and they are invested in the process. They have a little ownership, right? When we open a loop as human beings, we like to close it. And so when kids are involved at the beginning of the loop of dinner, they're more likely, it's not 100%, it's not all the time, but they're more likely to want to be part of the end, which is eating, right? And this works really well, even with our severe picky eaters. This is Dr. Nicole Berkins, who works with, very tough cases, kids on the autism spectrum. And she, for that reason, for the exposure bucket reason, recommends Kids Cook Real Food, my cooking class, to her patients and to their families, because it helps them get comfortable trying new foods and be exposed to a greater variety. Sorry, I thought I skipped those slides. Patty in Colorado shared how this process worked for her. She said, my 5-year-old always asks to help, but I didn't know where to start. They just did one class, and the 5-year-old cut up avocados and lettuce for tacos and made a fruit salad, because our strategies are so memorable and kid-friendly. And you can believe that 5-year-old also probably ate all those things. And these kids, she asked her kids what they enjoyed most about cooking class. Hellman said cutting things. Maroney, age 7, said making my own recipe. And Liberty, age 3, said scrambled eggs. Because kids are invested and they're excited about learning new things and learning how to eat. That's what we do at Kids Cook Real Food. We infuse your kitchen with connection, confidence, and creativity. This helps helps your kids be more resilient to everything life throws at them, because they really feel like they know some skills. They have some authentic work. They're able to be creative and work with their hands. And just like Maroney said, making up his own recipe gets him excited as a 7-year-old boy. So I hope this sounds exciting to you. I know especially our homeschoolers generally are really committed to life skills for your kids. So if teaching your kids to cook sounds exciting to you, sounds like it's a piece of your puzzle to solve the picky eating problem, the question kind of is, how will you do it, right? Are you going to use a cookbook? Are you going to watch the cooking shows? Kids cooking really works. So if you'd like a little help making sure that you can teach your kids in your kitchen in a logical order, you don't have to think about which tools or recipes are kid friendly, and you have these fun phrases like I've taught you today. We have fun phrases in our kids cooking class. And so that you can actually, really commit to getting it done, instead of buying that kid's cookbook and kind of put it on the shelf and like, oh, I don't know how to get started with that. That's where I would love to step in, and I would love to help you give your kids experiences like these beautiful kids in the pictures. And so our Kids Cook Real Food course is fully video based. I know it's available at Homeschool Buyers Co-op now through November 8th. So it's one of those classes that goes on and off. But it's been a very helpful course for many Homeschool Buyer Co-op families, and I'll be able to take some questions after we kind of jump into the last section. So here's one of our homeschooling families. Anne said her whole class, her kids, her whole family loved it. Her 12-year-old boy gave her a huge hug, thanked her, and said it was super fun to learn to cook. Okay, we all want hugs from our 12-year-old boys, right? And her 9-year-old boy at bedtime said, I wish we could do cooking class every day, which of course I love. Amy learned right along with her daughter. She's got a daughter who's a little frustrated that mom won't buy processed foods. And they made our kind of knockoff homemade rice-a-roni in the course. And her daughter said, Mom, it tastes just like the real thing. And Amy learned right along with her, which I love. So if you aren't super confident in the kitchen yourself, again, that's my job. That's where I'll take over and make that really easy for you. And you can learn right along with your kids these awesome cooking skills. So let's think, what if your kids could cook one dinner every week? What if they could handle breakfast? I mean, many homeschooling families have their kids making breakfast every day, or at least a nice big breakfast on the weekend. Like, would that be helpful to you as a homeschooling parent? Maybe, what if you could just save like 10, 15 minutes every day at dinner because you have some sous chefs who are well trained in your family? Would that be helpful to you? These are my kids. These are my kids on Kids Cooking Night. Leah and Paul started making one meal a week when they were 9 and 12. They are now 13 and 16. And most of the time, like when our routine changes, we fall off that wagon. But most of the time they're making one meal a week. And it is an incredible gift to me as a mom with my time, time challenges. It's an incredible gift to the whole family. And of course, to them thinking about their future and the skills that they have. I wanted to show you really briefly kind of the way our curriculum works. We have 8 core classes, and in each class there are 4 videos. We have beginner, intermediate. Oh, wait, hold on. I'm getting ahead of myself here. My slides are not what I was thinking. In each class, we focus on skills and not recipes. There's 4 videos, little kids, medium-sized kids, big kids, and an all kid. So we're very family friendly, very large family friendly, so that there's something for all your kids to actually do together. And again, we focus on skills, not recipes. So if you've got food allergies in your families or strong likes or dislikes, don't worry. You don't have to make the food we make. You can use the same skill on a variety of different recipes, and we can kind of help you make those decisions, how to apply the different skills. So I'm going to walk through sort of the basic categories we teach in our class. And what I want you to do is listen for your kids' ages, and whether or not we get to work together, you'll know sort of where to start with different ages of your kids. So what we call our beginner level is basically preschool, 2 to 5. And at that age, your small motor skills are very important. So you're going to work on things like measuring a flat teaspoon. You're going to work on pouring, maybe cutting with a butter knife, soft fruits and vegetables. Kids at that age have a very poor small motor control. That's why we're working on it, but that's also why they make messes, right? So if you want to know your child's small motor skills, have them brush your teeth and you will realize why sometimes they spill, and it will give you a great deal of empathy. Now, our intermediate level is pretty much when kids can read. So like early elementary, now we want to super duper raise the bar because they can do so much more. At that age, I want you to focus on teaching your kids to read a recipe. Okay, that's a different skill than reading a chapter book or reading a picture book. I encourage you to get sharp knives in the hands of your children. And that's where I will help, I can help teach you how to properly implement sharp knife techniques safely for kids. And at that age, by 6 or 7, they are old enough and mature enough to stand up on a chair and get to the stovetop. Teach them what's hot and what's not, and they can start working on some stovetop skills. Once kids have mastered those big 3, the sharp knives, reading a recipe, and the stovetop, now the world is their oyster. So we call our advanced level is basically 8 and up. That's when we level up to chef's knives and cut all sorts of stuff. That's where we can, our kids' executive function is more developed. You can start expecting them to potentially make a whole meal to balance 2 or even 3 recipes at the same time. And they're finally physically strong enough to get into the oven, to use the oven, right? Obviously, if there's a little fear there, you may want to wait a few years. But if the only thing you have to do on a recipe is get something in and out of the oven, you are winning, mom and dad. You are winning for sure. Okay, so quick recap, right? Once they're involved with the food, everything you do with your picky eaters at the table is going to work better. So you're going to prepare the space with MS-90 and done. You're going to set snack time boundaries. You're going to lead with your ACE, vegetables first, and you're going to keep a poker face. No reactions, no requirements to eat. Use whatever of those 21 phrases resonated with you the best. Okay. And actually, we didn't get all 21 phrases because I promised there are a few more at the end. So when we think about mindfulness, when we think about what we need for digestion to work well, we want our kids to listen to their bodies. Okay. I think that's a really important phrase to pull out. Sometimes we want to tell our kids to eat for how you want to feel. Okay. Especially if kids are not eating, we don't think enough, or they're not eating the right variety. Say like, how do you want to feel? Do you want to feel like you have energy? Then you need to eat foods that'll give you really good energy, right? Do you want to work hard at school and have a clear brain to help you get better at reading and math? Well, then you want to eat foods that'll give you a clear brain, right? And connect that idea that what we eat impacts how we think and how we feel. Now, this is mine. I don't have a clean plate club, but I do want to teach my kids to make good decisions. And I just hate going to parties or potlucks and kids will pile the plate, take 2 bites and then walk away and waste all that food. Like, I just can't handle that. So this is kind of an optional one. But it's a personal rule in our house that if you serve it, you finish it. And maybe it's not that meal. Maybe you put it away for another meal. But if you're serving it yourself, you need to think ahead about how hungry you are and what you're willing to eat. Now, when we're talking about treats or desserts or sweet treats or whatever you call the sugary things, I tell my kids to savor the fun foods, to savor the sweet treats, because they're really only good in our mouths. Once we swallow, they don't serve our body. Our bodies can handle some, but we teach our kids to savor those so that they last a little longer. I have a personal rule that the dessert can't be larger than the meal. I don't always say that out loud because then that invites negotiation with the kids. But if I'm going to be serving dessert and a child ate a very small dinner, they get dessert. Dessert cannot be contingent on eating the meal because that's kind of leaves my lane, and it makes dessert a trophy and the meal a drudgery, and that's not a good habit. But I will serve them quite a small serving if they ate quite a small dinner. That's just me. Now, my dream for you is that your kids are smiling in the kitchen like this, that they're approaching food with curiosity and not fear. And moms and dads, hopefully that you can get a little time like Deb there in the top right corner and do your Bible study or read a book or take a rest while your kids are cooking dinner. And most of all, that you feel less stress. They feel less stress at the table because you're able to avoid all those power struggles. Again, our Kids Cook Real Food eCourse is available through Monday, November 8th at Homeschool Buyers Co-op, the best deal you can get. And if there are any questions, I'm so happy to take them right now. Hi, Letty.
Hey, guys. So I do have a question. So, and then please, anyone who has a question, feel free to chat. And thank you for the comments as well. So what do you do about snacks and sugar? I have to admit, sometimes at our house, although my daughter's a college grad, which some of the Homeschool Buyers Co-op people know, we did do dessert before dinner sometimes. But what do you suggest about sort of migrating away from sugary snacks?
Yeah, so that's where I will use phrases like eat for how you want to feel. And especially once kids are, to the age of reason, like 3rd, 4th grade-ish and above, they can kind of understand. You can say, well, listen, like, sugar and white flour, that's really quick energy. But what happens with quick energy is then you lose it, right? And you get that crash. And so ideally your kids have that happen. They feel a little hangry and you say, oh, that didn't go real well, right? Not in the moment, but like the next day. Oh man, yesterday before dinner, you were having a hard time, weren't you? How'd that go? How did you feel? Ideally, you get the kid to say, well, I didn't like that. Well, why do you think you were so out of energy? I wonder, right? And like help them connect. Okay, like I ate a sugary snack, I had some quick energy and then it left. So the best snack is going to be protein, fat, fiber. So if we can teach our kids that's the kind of snack that satiates and satisfies and sticks to our ribs, then they can start to make their own good choices. Now, I wouldn't say never to have a sweet treat at snack time. Personally in our house, our dessert strategy right now, and it's always shifting as I know better, I do better. I'm not sure if we're perfect yet, but we allow our kids 1 sweet treat a day. They can choose whenever they have it, but it needs to be in one of those eating opportunities: breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, right? It's not just I'm bored, so I'm going to have it candy. So sometimes an after school snack for my kids might be an apple and, like right now, it's right after Halloween, right? So an apple and a sucker, or an apple and peanut butter, better, fat and protein. And they have their sweet treat too. So I wouldn't want a snack to be just the sweet treat. Try to have some fat and protein to mitigate that like blood sugar rush, to kind of even that out. But sometimes, like if my kid's going to have a piece of Halloween candy anyway, it might be better after school when they can run it off, burn it off, instead of like after dinner right before bed, if that makes sense. So that's how we do it. It's trying to help the kids take ownership, realize that fat and protein is going to make them feel better, make that snack last longer so they don't get hangry before dinner. And then the sweet treat, again, boundaries and choices. So the boundary is one, but they choose when.
Okay, and we do have a question. So Susan writes, she's sorry, but if you covered it. So in Kids Cook, how are the classes structured? Is it once a week? And just to confirm, they're pre-recorded videos.
Yes, Susan, yes, you don't have to show up at a certain time. These are all pre-recorded. And with our VIP level, you get access to everything at once. So while I recommend that you usually would do them in order, if you've got kids with some experience in the kitchen, some parents just kind of look at that curriculum map and say, oh, like we're going to hop around a little bit. They are pre-recorded, and families do this all different ways. I know a lot of homeschoolers will have like Friday relax day kind of, and they'll do a class every Friday. Some people just do it once a month. I think weekly is great, because then your kids have 6 days to sort of practice that skill that they learned, start to master it, and then get a new skill. But it's completely at your own pace. And you can teach, all your ages of kids at the same time, because like, let's say you do class 1 and maybe you have a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 10-year-old. If you have beginner, intermediate, and advanced running at the same time, what they create merges into one cohesive meal and snack. So that's just kind of a bonus for our larger families, that it's really something that you can do all together. So thanks for that question.
Okay, well, I just want to thank everyone. That was really great, Katie, and such great tips and approaches. So everybody who attended will get an email as a follow-up. And the webinar will be actually on the website in case you want to, take a look again or look at some of the tips and tricks that Katie talked about. So everyone have a great day, and we'll be scheduling the next webinar in January. So look for that. So thanks everyone. Have a great day. Bye.
Thanks, ladies. Thanks, Letty.